Okay, we are now recording today's Lunch and Learn webinar, Thinking About Starting an EdTeen Foundation. During this call, we will provide an introduction to Jewish teen philanthropy and help lay out the initial questions a community should consider before starting and launching a teen foundation. Our presenter is someone many of you know, Stefanie Zelkind, who has served as the founding director of JTFN for the past 7 years. For the sake of time, her full bio will be posted in the chat on the left. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stefanie to begin.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. And hi, everybody. It's really great to have you all on the call today. And as Andrew said, I'm going to run through an overview, and I don't want to speak too quickly, but I'm going to do my best to run through information at a speedy pace to ensure that we have time for your questions. We have some dedicated time at the end of the call for your questions, but what I'll invite folks to do as I'm speaking, if you have a question, to just over in that chat box in the bottom left corner to send your question to Andrew. And then he can either, he'll hold your question till the end, or if it feels particularly time sensitive, he'll just interrupt me with your question. I'll answer it then. So with that, let's get started. Excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. So what we're going to cover today is the key question of what is Jewish teen philanthropy, a snapshot of the field as it stands today, the content, goals, and strategy of a teen philanthropy program, a set of questions to consider if you're thinking about starting a teen philanthropy program in your community, and then some closing information about JTFN and how I hope we can be helpful to you as you move forward. So what is Jewish teen philanthropy? Each of the three words has some information that's worth just sussing out a little bit. So when we say Jewish, we're talking for the most part about Jewish teens. We're really focusing on Jewish values and traditions related to giving. And not just a superficial tacking on the word Jewish to a philanthropy program, but really delving into what Judaism has to teach us about the importance of giving and our responsibility to give as Jews. Teens, so we're working with teenagers from ages 13 to 18. For the most part, our programs are working with teens post-bar and bat mitzvah. And up through the end of high school. We find that just given teens' very busy schedules during the bar and bat mitzvah year, and also their own development and maturity, that working 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade seems to be the sweet spot with more sophisticated program opportunities as teens get older and can delve in more serious ways. And then for philanthropy, this is really the piece that I think is worth spending a moment on. What we're talking about when we say teen philanthropy is grant making. So I think a lot like the words tikkun olam that get tossed around and mean a lot of different things within institutional settings, lots of times when I speak to folks and I tell them what I do here, they say, oh, we have a teen philanthropy program at our synagogue or at our school. And then when I ask them to tell me more about it, it could be any range of programmatic initiatives. So it could mean a toy drive. It could mean a fundraising initiative. It could mean that there are tzedakah boxes in every classroom. It could mean there are service projects. And all of those initiatives are amazing and wonderful. And what we focus on here at JTFN is a focus on giving money away in a strategic manner through a Jewish lens. So this is not meant to replace those other initiatives, rather to complement them. But I want to be really clear right here at the start of the call that that's what we're focused on here at JTFN. And I think there are a lot of ways to thoughtfully and strategically pair this either in a linear manner or a complementary manner with other service or philanthropy-related initiatives that you may already be running. So the field of Jewish teen philanthropy is comprised of two primary program models. We have teen foundations and individual giving programs. Teen foundations are the model that we are most focused on developing and growing right now at JTFN, which is a collective giving model where a group of teens come together, pool funds of their own or that they may raise, and then work together as a foundation board to make joint decisions about what they care about, the kind of change they want to make in the world, and ultimately where they're going to award their grant funding. This is in contrast to individual giving programs, which in many communities are known as B'nai Tzedek accounts, if that name rings a bell for you. These are personal accounts. That's a model that was initiated by the Harold Grinspoon Foundation in Western Massachusetts and then taken nationally. They sit primarily at federations and Jewish community foundations and are structured either as individual endowment accounts or giving accounts. So much like a personal savings account, a teen at the time of bar and bat mitzvah, with the help of her parents, would open up an individual account in her name and have that money dedicated to philanthropic giving for her to make this grant-making decisions over time by herself. So this type of program sometimes comes with educational programming alongside, sometimes not, but really operates like an adult donor-advised fund, or other type of giving account, which is a way to reach, in certain communities, many more teens without as much programming investment, but doesn't incorporate this collective piece, which we find to be so powerful from an educational standpoint. So as I said, our focus on this call and really in our work at JTFN right now is on the Teen Foundation model, so that's what I'll focus on for the rest of this call. I just want to frame also for one moment a sense of historical context of this field. The Jewish teen philanthropy field is modeled very closely off of a very successful teen philanthropy field that exists beyond the Jewish community that started in the late 1980s in Michigan with support from the Kellogg Foundation, the Michigan Council of Foundations, and other local foundations there who established youth advisory committees out of the community foundations throughout Michigan, and really structured this model of bringing teens together and empowering them as grant makers both to learn about needs in their community and about the importance of philanthropy. And so that model really served as a base for us as these programs have grown now since we started about a decade after the Michigan program in the Jewish community. And since then have grown quite tremendously, as you'll see in this next slide. So today we have 138 programs that operate throughout the United States and Canada. And you see the breakdown here where most of the programs are operating as teen foundations with 32 communities running these individual giving programs. And there are some communities that run both. It's not mutually exclusive. The programs run in all types of Jewish institutions. So depending on your community, you may find that the right home for a teen foundation is a federation. It may be a synagogue, a day school, Board of Jewish Education, or other educational initiative. And you see the layout here of what the current field looks like. And when we get into points to consider later in the call, you'll see that this decision is a really important one when you're just starting out, if there isn't a teen philanthropy program yet in your community, to really find the appropriate home as you bring this initiative to your local teens. So we have a slide here about the numbers. And something I find is that when we talk about our work as Jewish teen philanthropy, people jump very quickly to the dollars, right? How much money are kids giving away? And it's not a small number, when we think about the impact collectively that all of these teen foundations are making. It's really quite impressive, which is why we share it here. I think it's important to know. But at its core, these programs are really about Jewish education and engagement. So I think it's holding both of those pieces together where we're not working, I'm going to move this slide here, we're working with real money. And you see here the amounts that were granted over the last several years. We hold a survey called Where Did the Money Go?, where we ask the teen foundations throughout North America to report back to us on the grants that their teens awarded. And what you see here is there's a very wide range of the size of grants that teen foundations give away. There are teen foundations that work with grant pools of $1,000 total, that they may give away as one grant of $1,000 or split it up into a couple of smaller grants. And there are others that give away more, all the way up to $40,000. And they're giving away their grants starting at $5,000. Let's see. From an educational standpoint, we really focus on what the teens are learning and experiencing through this process. Of course, the more money they have to give away, the more philanthropic impact they can have, and the more questions they will have the opportunity to grapple with about the kind of grant making they want to do, the way they might divide up the money, and so forth. So we'll get into the question about building the grant-making pool later, but for here I just wanted to show you a sense of the variety that exists in the field today.
As a reminder, if anyone has any questions, feel free to post them in the chat box, and we'll get to those later.
Great. So the slide we have up now is the core content of a Jewish Teen Foundation. So what I want to say first and foremost is that every teen foundation is unique. Each community creates a program that meets their local needs, serves their local teens, and has, we hope, the creative touch and flair of the adult who's facilitating and working with these teens. So what we offer from JTFN standpoint is a compilation of the amazing materials that have been created by our colleagues throughout North America, and a sense of an overarching program arc that most teen foundations follow. We often describe it as a choose-your-own adventure, where there are kind of touch points that we hope that programs incorporate, but along the way there are some key decisions to make about how you would cover programmatically, or tactically each of these points. But I'll just run through quickly here the key points that you would see in most teen foundations. So we'd start from a place of exploring Jewish texts about giving and this question of what is Jewish giving and what does it mean to me? And values clarification. What do I care about? What will drive our giving? Here's a place at the very beginning where teens are introduced to the idea of a collective and being part of a group that will make decisions together. So they may go through some activities as individuals and asking questions about what do I care about, and then move into the question of group identity building and what do we care about together. Part of that work will be creating a mission statement for their teen foundation that will declare for themselves and for the outside world, this is what our Jewish Teen Foundation cares about and the change we hope to affect in the world. Based on that mission statement, they'll then start relating to the nonprofit sector. So after an introduction to what the nonprofit sector is and what the process of grant making looks like, they will distribute a request for proposals to organizations that work within the context of the mission statement they defined, invite grant proposals in, review the grant proposals, and be trained on how to read a grant proposal and ask the critical questions that you would want to include as you assess a grant proposal. Learn more about the organization through site visits and seeing the organization in action. When that's not possible, we have teen foundations that conduct Skype visits, particularly if they are learning about organizations overseas. And sometimes teen foundations will invite representatives of nonprofits to come to them and have representative meetings in their own site of where the teen foundation is meeting just for logistical constraints. But whichever way this piece is done, the key is that the teens have an opportunity to really delve in deep, learn about the nonprofits, and have this opportunity to experience an interaction that's very different for them at this age, where the power dynamic is quite different to what they're used to, right? They're going to sit together as the funders, meeting with the nonprofit and have the opportunity to ask lots of probing questions to understand how the organization works and what the organization would do if the teens chose to fund them. They then will jump into consensus building, learn about what it means to make a decision as a group, practice it, and then put it to the test as they decide how they are going to split up their grant-making pool to make grant decisions. The kinds of questions that are raised here bring in the Jewish values and teaching that has happened throughout the program, where they're asking questions about, well, what does it mean to give Jewishly? And are we going to rank these organizations in a certain way based on our core values? And what kind of impact do we want to have? Does it make sense for us to give one big grant rather than 4 smaller grants? Do we want to prioritize giving in our local community as opposed to giving nationally or internationally? To these kinds of questions, there aren't right or wrong answers, and we're not looking for any particular result. I think the key here is that the teens are asking the questions, and they're working through answers that feel right to them in the moment, with some input and guidance perhaps from local funders or experts that you may bring in as guest speakers, also with some guidance from the adult facilitator in the room. But ultimately the teens come to the decisions and own those decisions themselves, which is really important, and then award the grants. They close out the grant-making process by letting the organizations that they've decided to fund know the good news. They loop back with the organizations that they decided not to fund and thank them for their participation in the process, and then end with some type of celebration and sharing. A lot of programs have a final check presentation ceremony, which is an opportunity to invite the grantee organizations in, invite parents, siblings, teens who you may be recruiting for the next year in, for some sort of event where the teens have an opportunity to present oftentimes blow-up version of checks and talk a little bit about the process they went through to arrive at these decisions, which is a really, not only is it a nice event and a way to close out the program, but it's a really meaningful step in the process for the teens to process and kind of unpack the experience that they had, which for many kids is very powerful and transformative. We see, in thinking about where this leads them, in future endeavors. So again, as I said, this is a general flow, and if you move forward in thinking about how to create a teen foundation in your community, and we put you in touch with some folks who are doing this work, you'll hear different versions of this, but I think it's helpful to have a sense of this overarching skeleton. So alongside that, we have some common goals of a Jewish Teen Foundation. These 3 goals came in after a survey that we had sent out to our teen foundations in asking, what are your goals in your Jewish Teen Foundation? These 3 kind of bubbled up to the top as being commonly articulated goals. So we have here teaching basic philanthropy principles and giving with Jewish values, developing teen leadership, and encouraging group decision making. So depending on which goals are primary to you and to your institution, you may reorder these. You may find that there are other goals that are particularly important to you, and there's room within the Teen Foundation structure to shine the light on one or more of these goals and really develop those out further. We very much frame the work of Jewish Teen Philanthropy in the broader field of experiential education. And what we have here are 3 key components of successful experiential education: recreation, socialization, and challenge. And what I wanted to flag here is just in each of these 3 components, Jewish Teen Philanthropy kind of fits if we see this as some sort of checklist. I don't think this is a program that I would describe as being primarily social. This isn't, a dance party or, kind of just a fun retreat. I think it's work. The challenge piece is really big in these programs, but I think the recreation and the socialization pieces are very evident in the program, and it's validating, I think, to our work, particularly for those programs that are running out of educational institutions, to be able to take an overlay like this and put it on their program, could use it as an assessment tool even to see how is our Jewish Teen Foundation doing up against these key descriptors. We're going to have our next Lunch and Learn call specifically focused on experiential education and lessons we may learn from that. So there's information about that call at the end of today's Lunch and Learn call, but I'll just flag that for folks who may be interested. Really, what I think we found as being the core to the success of Jewish Teen Philanthropy is on this slide. So right here in the center of the slide, you see the word real. The fact that these Jewish Teen Foundations are working with real money and giving teens the opportunity to make real impact with real nonprofit organizations is key to the success of these programs. We hear that from teens, we hear that from educators, and we hear that from the nonprofits as well. So I have been asked many times if a program like this would work with monopoly money, because if it's an educational program, shouldn't we be able to just run a simulation and have the teens ask the same kinds of questions and go through the same kind of process? And, it seems like it should work with monopoly money, but the fact that it's real delivers a different message to our teens in saying that we entrust them to make serious decisions. We are going to learn about Jewish texts, traditions, and values in a way that's relevant to real decisions they're going to make. And I think it allows teens to carry a level of responsibility with the knowledge of an impact that they can make on their community around them, however they define their core community, that is very rare in middle school or high school. So again, I don't think this necessarily speaks to a particular dollar amount that the teens have to give away in order to feel this. I will say the dollar amount needs to feel significant. So that I think is different in different types of institutional settings, in different communities based on socioeconomic variety across North America. That's something I'm happy to talk to folks about offline and thinking about how you might structure your program. But the fact that it's real money and that the teens know that from the start and that they will get to own the decisions is really key. Okay, so I'm going to pause for one moment before I jump into the questions of considerations and just give folks a minute to type in any questions in the chat that they may have now before we keep going.
And as you're typing, as a reminder, because I know a couple people joined a little bit late, a recording of this webinar and a copy of the slides will be emailed to everybody following. So we'll have that to work off of as well.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Okay, I don't see any yet. You may still be typing. So I'll just keep on talking, and we'll make sure there's time for questions in a couple minutes. So presumably you're on the call because you're thinking about creating a teen foundation in your community, which is great. So some key questions to think about. The very first bullet point is that it's community specific. It's really hard to offer overarching guidance about how to do this, because every Jewish community operates differently. There are different players, politics, and considerations. But to the extent that I can offer some general guidance, we have here a list of the popular institutional hosts that we see, and really thinking about the mission and work of these organizations, the staffing, where teens are currently involved, and thinking about which organization makes the most sense to do this work in our community. The very first step is to ask around if any programs already exist in your community. There may well be programs within synagogues in particular that are serving just congregants in that synagogue that you may not be aware of. And depending on the size of your community, it may or may not make sense to have multiple programs. So you'll want to think about that, where the program sits. Next up are questions about leadership. So the staffing of these programs, well, let me back up. Before I talk about staffing, I just want to say from a programmatic side, these programs can be built to different scale. So we have programs that operate as part of an overarching program, like one course in a community Hebrew high school. There are programs, or one elective at a summer camp. Then there are programs that operate as standalone extracurricular activities. So there's a teen foundation at a community foundation, a place where teens aren't necessarily going otherwise, but are applying to be part of this teen foundation and have an opportunity to be in this leadership experience. Depending on the broader infrastructure, the extent to which the program will need to be staffed will range. So a program could be built that would a robust program that would call for a full-time staff person, or a 75% staff person, scaled all the way down to a part-time staff person, where this might be one of many responsibilities that he or she has. This is, the specifics are probably better discussed offline once we know more of what you're thinking, specifically of how much time a teen foundation would take for a staff person. But I would definitely caution, as you think big about what a program could look like, that we carry the staffing responsibilities alongside that conversation, because we know that with almost all teen programs, having a strong adult presence and the right person in the job is really important for the success of the program. So it's both about how much time somebody needs to dedicate, and also about who that person is, and the appropriate experience or expertise that needs to be brought to the table. So here what I'd say is that I often talk about the triangle of a staff person's desired skills or experience. So we have the Jewish, somebody who is comfortable facilitating a conversation about Jewish values. We have the teen, someone who has experience with a teen empowerment, teen leadership model, enjoys working with teens, and sees working with teens as teens and not as adults in development is really important. And the last part is philanthropy and grant making, and someone who has experience or knowledge of the grant making process. Now, it's really hard to find one person who has significant experience in all three of those areas. There are rare examples of those folks, and we love those folks. But I think what we've seen in a lot of communities is that here's a great opportunity to have co-facilitators, or to have one staff person and some lay leaders, volunteers, guest speakers. There are different structural ways to make sure you're hitting all three of those points. But this ties together with thinking about the institutional host, of saying if you're an organization that's primarily focused on grant making and that's where your experience lies, that's great. You can check that one off. But if you've never worked with teens before, that would be a skill set to look for in hiring somebody to facilitate this program, to bring that set of knowledge and skills into your organization. So in addition to professional staffing, there's a question of lay leadership. I'm talking about adult leadership here. That can be minimal, can be a full operating lay committee. This is also a consideration now to think about before you have a program, because as I'm sure we've all seen, that the more buy-in you have, the better, both for getting started and for long-term sustainability. So I would definitely encourage folks to think about involving some adults, whether they're fellow professionals, parents of teens who may be interested, rabbis, other communal leaders, philanthropic leaders, funders in your community, and then thinking about the different roles and responsibilities that may make sense for a group of adults in relation to a teen foundation. And third, there's a question of teen leadership. So here's an opportunity to embrace the teen empowerment component of these programs early on and invite some teens in either to serve on an adult committee that you pull together or to have a separate teen leadership committee so that you have a select group of teens who are helping to shape the program from the very beginning. This, I think, is a really valuable step, both from a values and kind of mission standpoint and also at a very pragmatic level where having a couple of teen leaders will serve you in recruitment, PR, and general establishment within the teen community, as this will be an extra opportunity for that group of teens. Okay, more questions to consider, calendar and participants. So I'm getting into the nitty-gritty here, and we're going to run through this part pretty quickly, but think about program session. Here's a place to think about your teens, your community, and what's realistic for teens in your setting. How often is realistic that teens are going to come together? How long could they meet for? And over how much time will your teen foundation meet? So most of our programs run over the course of an academic year, and they'll meet once a month, usually on Sunday afternoons or evenings, for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. There are programs that meet weekly. Again, I had mentioned the example of programs that meet within a Hebrew school setting. We have programs at camp that just by definition are running only over the summer and are condensed, so they're meeting over a shorter amount of time, but individual sessions may be longer. I have found in our experience in helping programs get started and run that safe minimum is 15 to 20 hours. I think the more time that you can give, the more you can do with the teens and the deeper the education and experience is. So I would definitely encourage more time if you have it. But again, we want to do a reality check and not dream up an amazing program that no teens will come to because it's in conflict with everything else they're involved with. We definitely hear across the board that the number one challenge our program leaders have is with scheduling. So I wrote here, maximize participation and avoid conflict, right? So if that were easy to do, we could sell that solution for a lot of money. I don't think there is an easy way to do it, but in thinking about starting a new program, it's important to be in touch with colleagues, find out when when sports events are happening, when youth groups are meeting, when Hebrew school is happening. Find a time that sets you up for success. There are lots of questions about recruitment to think about early on. What age do you want to target? And are you looking at one grade or multiple grades? As I said, we have found that 9th, 10th, 11th seems to be a really good time. building on the bar and bat mitzvah experience, but not during the bar and bat mitzvah experience. A lot of programs focus on the leadership element of Jewish Teen Foundation work, and we see a lot of teen participants writing about their teen philanthropy programs in their college applications. So that's something to consider also in recruitment. And I wrote selectivity here because that's also something to think about early on. Is this a program that you want to present in your community as a leadership program, a selective program, a competitive program? Or is it something that you want to have open to whomever wants to apply? And how will you handle that should demand exceed your capacity? This is really about knowing the landscape of your community and thinking about how you want to position a program like this. Okay, Grantmaking Pool, a set of considerations here. So as I said before, this program, while it's not primarily about dollars, it's primarily about education and engagement, the dollars are not insignificant. So the teens need to have a grant-making pool to give away in order for this process to work. So how will that grant-making pool be created in your teen foundation? There are a lot of ways this is done in existing teen foundations. We have participant contributions where each teen will put in a certain amount of money at the start of the program. That is structured in some programs as just a requirement for the program. In some programs, it's optional, or there may be a minimum amount the teens put in, and they're invited to put in more if they want. Participants' families' contributions, where there may be where teens may fundraise from their family and friends. Local adult donors, either as just a seed grant to the grant-making pool. Lots of times this is structured as a match to the teens' contributions. So for every dollar the teens put in or raise, a donor in the community will put in $1. Grants, that could be a grant from your own institution where you would say, we're going to ask the teens to be responsible for X, and we as the host organization will put in Y to leverage the grant fund so that you have more to give away. There's teen fundraising, where your teen participants may fundraise to add to the grant-making pool either on their own or as a group, and there are lots of ways that can be done. And then this last bullet point probably should have been right up at the top is sustainability, which is about the grant-making pool and about your program as a whole. How do you create a program that has the lasting power to sustain itself over time, so that both from kind of a programmatic level and for a grant-making level, so that it's structured so that each year the teens are guaranteed a grant-making pool that they could work with and that your operational costs are covered. So this is an area that we are happy to consult with and share some best practices that we've seen successful models use in programs that exist throughout North America. Okay, sorry, I jumped ahead here. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second here. I just want to peek over at the chat and make sure I answer questions about these considerations before I talk a little bit about JTFN and how I hope we can be helpful. Okay, awesome. Wendy, I see you have, Okay, Sarah has a question here about multi-year programs, which is a great question. We have teen foundations that run as one-year programs and teen foundations that run as a 2, 3, up to a 5-year longitudinal experience. And what we see, I think if I can generalize, is that a 2-year program is a great way to go if you can build it out from a capacity standpoint. Having an opportunity for the teens to go through a grant-making process once and then be able to come back a second year either in a leadership capacity or just as a second-year participant, and be able to go through the process again, adding on a new level of skills, maybe adding on a fundraising piece in the second year if there wasn't one in the first year, combining it with hands-on service if that's of interest. But changing it up a little bit so the second year is not just a complete repeat performance of the first is definitely something we see that works very well in a lot of communities. We hear from a lot of programs that and this is, I think in part a reflection of this being still a relatively new field, is that programs are structured in a lot of communities as a one-year experience. And then as the program comes to a close, teens start asking, well, what are we going to do next year? We want to come back. So this is a great problem to have, right? You have teens who are clamoring for more, and then staff who will come to us and come to peers within the network saying, how do we create an alumni initiative and engage these teens who have been turned on by the experience of doing teen philanthropy work? We don't want to lose them, obviously. So I would say thinking about alongside the questions of duration and scheduling, how you want to structure this program if it's a one-year or multi-year program. And there was another question here from Wendy about foundation graduates and if we have information about alumni, which it's a great question because we just now actually in the last year have seen some of our oldest programs turn 10. So now with 10 years behind them, they have been able to, we have 3 programs who have been able to conduct 10-year impact studies of their alumni who are now in college or beyond and ask about their Jewish involvement and engagement, about their philanthropic giving, and about their leadership. All of those studies are on our website. We can include links to that when we follow up with you after this call. But I can say that the overarching answer is that the impact is very positive. Teens speak very highly of this experience and point to it as being a motivator for their involvement at the college campus level in philanthropy, service, and other Jewish life. It's a little bit hard to measure philanthropic giving because they are only in college or just a couple of years out and may not yet be earning enough to be giving away significant dollars of their own. So the real test on that regard is going to be when we study them 20 or 30 years out. But the anecdotal data, in addition to these 3 hard studies that were done, is very positive. Any other questions that came in here? No. Okay, so let me talk for a minute or two about JTFN and how I hope we can be helpful, and then we'll open up again for questions. So please don't hesitate to type questions in as I'm chatting if there are questions on your mind. So JTFN as a resource for this quickly growing field is really here to help network local programs that exist and folks like yourselves who are thinking about creating programs in your community. So we are kind of at the 30,000-foot view, understanding that the real work is happening on the ground with the teens, and we're here to help support those efforts and connect you with one another and with the materials and best practices that have been developed and evolved in the field. In addition to that, we have a couple of initiatives that we're running here to help grow and strengthen the field. So our current initiatives are as listed here. We have a camp philanthropy program called Think Outside the Box, which will be running this summer for kind of our 4th year. We ran 2 years as pilot, and then this past year we went to scale with 38 summer camps running Jewish teen foundations with a curriculum that is built on materials that have been created from teen foundations throughout the country and adapted for the camp setting. Another program we're running is called Stepping Up, which is a regional model that's running in Long Island, New York, where we have 9 teen foundations running out of synagogues, schools, and JCCs in Long Island, focused specifically on learning about local needs in Long Island and granting all of their dollars locally. And then the third initiative we're running is our newest initiative called the Teen Foundation Expansion Program. I know that some of you who are on the call today are working and connecting to us through that program, which is a program that is working with a select group of communities to create intensive and robust teen foundations that will operate across the community with significant investment and long thoughts towards long-term sustainability. And there's information about all 3 of those programs up on our website, which I'm going to show you a little bit of in a minute. We also have, as part of our ongoing work, this Lunch and Learn webinar series where we have calls each month on different topics related to the 3 different components of our work, the Jewish, the teen, and the philanthropy. And next spring, we're going to have our National Leadership Summit, to which you're all cordially invited. We haven't had a conference in a couple of years, so we're particularly excited about bringing everyone together. And I really believe that even with all of the help of technology, nothing replaces face-to-face conversations and opportunities to meet each other and hear stories of success and troubleshoot challenges together. So I would encourage you to come to that if your schedule permits. We'll have folks from programs that have been running for 10 years. We'll have folks who are involved in newer programs, and I imagine a lot of people who are there just to learn more and think about how to bring teen philanthropy to their communities. So there'll be more information about that coming out in the next couple of months. And as Margot kind of brought to our attention early on in the call, we are very pleased to finally have a new website to offer the field. It took us a long time to get this site up, so huge thanks to Andrew for getting us to the finish line. And we have a couple of screenshots here because I want to make sure that everybody is really clear on where the resources are for you in moving past this call into really thinking through how to start a teen foundation in your community. So this is our homepage at jtfn.org. Right here in the middle, there's a resource button. So if you click on this, resources, you'll see these subheadings. You can see full curriculum from programs who have shared with us their entire program curriculum from A to Z. There are program materials that are all searchable by program type. So if you want to see specifically, how do I teach consensus? How do I teach Rambam's Ladder of Tzedakah? You can search those or browse through and see different types of materials. Okay, this is the full curriculum page. And here's just an example of one of the curricula. This is a program, a pilot program that we had run in partnership with URJ that just breaks down, you see here, all of the elements of the curriculum, and you can just download the whole thing. Everything is free, easy to download. We just ask 2 things in exchange. One is that you acknowledge JTFN if you're printing the materials, and even more importantly, acknowledge the original creator of the materials. These are our colleagues who are running teen foundations and have been generous enough to share the materials that they created. So we ask that that just gets included in anything you print. And the second would be that as you get started, that you add the name of your program to our directory, which is here under Network, so that folks can be in touch with you to learn more about your program, and it helps us deliver the message to the broader community that this is a field that is indeed continuing to grow. The directory also will be important to you in learning more about the field. Here's an example of one directory listing that just gives an overview of the program along with contact information for their key staff person. So this may be useful either to just kind of browse through on your own, or if it would be helpful to talk to someone here at JTFN and have us make specific suggestions of programs you may want to learn more about. We're happy to do that. There's a section here for news and events to find out what's going on. Lunch and Learns, as I mentioned. And here's a list of our staff and contacts. You'll see information here about our next Lunch and Learn webinar, which you'll receive an invitation to. But while the screen is here, if folks want to put it in their calendar, feel free. I'm going to leave it up on this screen and just look over to the chat. And
we have one question that came in.
Great.
If we have a teen foundation with teens making a multi-year commitment involved for multiple years, how does it deal with the basic educational information of the new teens without alienating those who participated in prior years? So incorporating the new teens and the returning teens together educationally.
Got it. Great question. So depending on the balance between your returning kids and your new kids, I have a couple of thoughts. One is if you have primarily new teens, you may think about your returning teens as kind of peer leaders and give them the opportunity to teach the new teens. That may call for some additional work with them prior to the sessions to go deeper, provide them with broader context. Great new learning for them. It could be training that even involves going to local funders, professionals, nonprofits in the community, and giving them a new learning opportunity that they can then teach to others. If the balance is the other way, where you have primarily returning teens and a couple of newer teens, I would think there about having some of your returning teens in partnership with you as staff run some sort of boot camp for your new teens. And also thinking about new elements that you may bring in about grant-making skills as a refresher that will be important both for your new teens and your returning teens. It depends a lot on how intensive your program is, but if the teens did it one time, especially for those of you who are in the grant-making business already, reading grant proposals once does not make you an expert on reading grant proposals. So having a chance to do it in the second year, I don't think it would be crazy to do a refresher training on how to review grant proposals. Again, there could be an opportunity for returning teens to teach some of the new teens or to think about sharing that information in a new way so that the returning teens don't feel like they're repeating too much from the first year. I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to kind of think more about that and follow up offline.
Okay, with that, unless there are any remaining questions, I think that this is going to conclude today's webinar. This again will be available in your inboxes this afternoon, copies of the slide as well as a link to this recording, which will be on YouTube, and we invite you to share this with others at your institutions that were not able to join today. And as you can see, our next Lunch and Learn call is Tuesday, December 10th, and as mentioned, we're going to be dealing with theories of experiential education and Jewish teen philanthropy. Our guest presenter will be Phil Lifgrief. He's the Associate Director of the Builders of Jewish Education in Los Angeles. Should be a great presentation. You can RSVP for that online, which I'm glad everybody was able to use our new RSVP online feature, which is another advancement of our website. I want to thank Stefanie for presenting today. And if you have further questions or other thoughts, please feel free to contact any of us here at JTFN, and we'd be happy to work with you one-on-one to build out your teen philanthropy program at your institution. So with that, that will end our recording.
Could I just ask that before we hang up that you just open up the line so we could just say
the conference has been unmuted.
Yes, everyone should be unmuted now.
Great. So I hate hanging up on these calls and just feeling like it's dead silence out there. So I just want to thank everybody again for joining in, and to echo Andrew, if we can be helpful at all, that's what we're here for, so please don't hesitate to call.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Stefanie. This was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Please stand by.